Hello, my name is Catherine Sendak, and welcome to CEPA's State of the Alliance, a series bringing together thought leaders from Europe and North America to deliberate the most pressing challenges facing allies and partners. Today, I am honored to welcome Lieutenant General Karel Řehka, Chief of the General Staff of Czechia. Thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you for the invitation.
Yes, we're so happy you're here. So as we get started, here we are more than 2 years since Russia's full-scale invasion into Ukraine, more than 10 years since their illegal annexation of Crimea. From your perspective, how is the alliance doing? How would you assess the alliance's support to Ukraine to this point?
I think the alliance is doing pretty well, and it's not just in support of Ukraine, but it's also in its own transformation. If you look at what the Vladimir Putin was trying for a long time, I think he understands that the center of gravity for the alliance is the cohesion and the unity. And I think he was trying to disrupt it all the time. But actually what he managed to do by the invasion and full-scale war in Ukraine, he managed to do quite opposite. So I think we are stronger. We have better cohesion and unity. And we not only support Ukraine as a individual countries or as a collectively, but we also we finally woke up and we are pushing very hard on strengthening our deterrence and defense, and we are transforming ourselves.
Yeah. Speaking of that waking up, the initiative started by Czechia to obtain more critical munitions for Ukraine, looking all around the world, looking for sources to provide Ukraine. There's been a lot of news recently about progress in that initiative. I would love your thoughts on the progress of it and what we all are seeking to do.
Yeah, okay, well, this got some attention now because our president mentioned it during the Munich Security Conference. But actually, this has been an ongoing scheme for the last 2 years, pretty much since the beginning of the invasion. And so not only we provide assistance in different fields, in all instruments, so it's diplomatically, economy-wise, and also militarily. We provide support for training, but also for material, not only from the army stocks, but also from our defense industry. And one of the schemes, what we do is that we try to identify stuff around the world which is needed in Ukraine and make sure we ship it to Ukraine. And so currently, we talked about this artillery munitions, especially. This is something which is very urgently and acutely needed in Ukraine. So obviously, in the midterm and long term, we need to boost our production capacity. But at the same time, this will take some time. So what we try to do, we managed to identify ammunition which is needed in Ukraine around the world. And we try to connect the financing and money from different places with the ammunition and make sure it's organized and it can get to Ukraine as soon as possible.
Providing that stopgap while both Europe and the United States amp up production, which we've both recognized needs to happen faster. So that's great to hear. I think from the alliance perspective, Czechia is celebrating its 25th anniversary in NATO this year. And later on, we'll be celebrating the 75th anniversary of NATO as an alliance. As you all look back on 25 years of membership in NATO, would love your thoughts on the evolution of the relationship, how you assess the partnership, and moving forward that partnership with NATO.
Well, actually, I see it as a military person because I'm a soldier. But truly, it's not about military being in NATO. It's about the whole country being part of NATO. It brought, and what it gave us mostly is a prosperity. Because it gives us safety, stability, and security. And that means prosperity, because you cannot have prosperity for your citizens without security. So I would say we live comfortable lives, we are very safe and secure, and I think this is thanks to NATO. And I think one of the major lessons out of the Ukraine war, the nationwide lesson, the strategic level lesson, is really, it showed us and reminded us how important it is that we became part of NATO and that we used that window of opportunity, what we had. And I have to just thank to all of those people who managed to do it, because this was major achievement. And historically, if you look long term in the history of our country, we are in a Central Europe. We are not an easy geographic location. And actually, right now, we have a unique situation where we are surrounded by only allies and friends. And that's whether it's NATO or EU. And this is absolutely crucial for the security and prosperity of our country.
That's such an interesting perspective because there's so many European countries that aren't surrounded by allies and friends that have a very different border. And to that end, as we look at Russia's, illegal full-scale invasion in Ukraine, as you all, from a military perspective, look at your planning, your threat assessments, your strategic priorities, how has Russian actions influenced those priorities?
It influenced everything. And it's, again, it goes from this grand strategic level down to the tactical level, what we do in military. We, and it's not only Czech Republic, because we're not in isolation, it's the whole EU and the whole NATO especially. As I mentioned, the NATO changed a lot, so we finally implementing with the concrete measures these deterrence and defense concept with the new family of plans, with the new force model and all those things. And obviously Czech Republic is reacting to. For us, everything changed. We have a new national security strategy. We have a new defense strategy. And for the military, we have the new development concept for the military. And those are all three, those documents are key for the military. It gives us tasking and also the direction, and it's a governmental level documents. And basically what it says and what's the major change is, first, it clearly identifies the threats. And in regards to Ukraine, it mentions that Russia is the greatest and the direct threat to the Czech Republic, which wasn't mentioned before in the security strategy. And it also tells us that we need to prepare, we need to do long-term preparations for a potential large-scale, high-intensity armed conflict with a technologically advanced enemy who possess the nuclear weapons. So that's a complete shift. That's a different tasking for the military. And it also, the other important narrative of those strategies is that, and it's, again, it's a major lesson from Ukraine, is that if you are preparing for such a eventuality, for such a conflict, the defense is not about military, it's about the whole of society approach. So these are the major lines, and obviously for the military, then it gives you different problem set. So you not only look at the expeditionary capabilities, you need to look at, you need to modernize and change every warfighting function of the military pretty much. And it's much more about also stocks, supplies, different sustainment concept, security of supplies, reserves, and things like that, which were not so relevant for the out-of-area operations.
Right. A very different fight. We've been fighting for the past 20 plus years.
Exactly.
And so that it's a great note. And you bring up the regional defense plans that the alliance is working on implementing. From your perspective, are there challenges with the execution of those plans that you're concerned about? How do you feel the implementation is going so far?
Well, of course there are challenges.
With almost 32 partners here?
Nothing good is easy, never. So yes, there are challenges, obviously, because it's not only my country, I guess, it's more countries. For the last 20 plus years, we were focusing on something completely different. Plus, I have to say, we heavily under-resourced the defense and the military in our country, at least, in the last 2 decades. And that's, if you waiting for the crisis and then you start investing into the defense, that's the most stupid way you can do it. And this is exactly what happened. So I believe we learned from it. There's a major change also and major political support of the government to the military. We get a new law which tells us by law that we need to invest minimum 2% of GDP into defense. And obviously that basically changes a lot, yeah.
Yeah. Well, it's so interesting. We were talking before about, seeking munitions for Ukraine, in everywhere, globally. And we're learning so many lessons here in the United States about how to restock and replenish our stocks and what that looks like, that long-term planning. What is the Czech Republic doing to address internal stocks, munitions, replenishment?
It's part of the plan. But we try to. It's one of the priority areas for me. It's a speeded modernization, and it's priority for the whole MOD and for the whole country, I would say. So we are, because of the gaps from the past, we have to invest a lot into modernization now. So actually, you probably know that the recommended portion of the budget is about minimum 20% should go into modernization and investments. For next 5 to 7 years, for us, it's actually above 50% goes to modernization and investment. In some years, it's actually 60%. And this is not long-term, sustainable, probably portion, but this just tells you how much under-resourced we were in the past. So this is one of the area we're doing. We're getting rid of the any dependency on the Soviet type of equipment, which we already changed very much, but now we're doing the rest. We're modernizing every warfighting function you look at. So it's firepower, sustainment, mobility, intelligence, everything basically is modernized. We have a number of projects. Obviously, the biggest ones, the well-knowns are the F-35s, are the CV-90s, the infantry fighting vehicles, because it's major projects, but actually it's guns, it's air defense, it's radars, it's sensors, it's everything. So this is one thing, but at the same time, the second thing, we are gradually building up the stocks of munitions and other things. And also when we procure new equipment, we are much more looking at the life cycle, security of supplies, and we always try to get at least 30% of the investment from the domestic industry. So to help to develop the domestic defense industry.
Yeah, that's great. You know, I've always appreciated that goal within the alliance of the 20% modernization and equipping. I think it's a worthy goal that doesn't get enough attention publicly, because that is how you're going to address these challenges moving forward, to make sure you have the things you need and the capabilities that you need to address the threat. So turning topics a little bit, lessons learned from the battlefield in Ukraine, the convergence of 21st century technology and 20th century warfighting. We're seeing the increased use of AI, UAS on the battlefield for different ways than we predicted. As you're looking at that from your perspective and where you sit in the Czech Republic, how are you all viewing the evolution of warfare when it comes to the use of technology?
So there are those nationwide big lessons, which is about resilience, whole of society approach or whatever. But if I go to the military part, to the warfare, there's again, if you look at the warfighting functions the military does on the battlefield, every function has major lessons. So there's a lot of it. But I would say what is interesting now on the battlefield, or what it shows us, is first, the big war between the two states, big states or more states, will never be short. There's always element of attrition, even though you may have technological advantage. There will be this element. That's why you need those supplies, reserves, and all that stuff. So the operational capacity is not only about quality, but it's a combination of quality and quantity, and you have to look for the right balance. So that's one of the lessons. Obviously, if you look at this war, it may remind you the First World War, because of trench warfare, Second World War, the tanks, the heavy use of artillery, but actually, that just looks on the surface. But below the surface, you have this combination of the old and new with a lot of the modern technologies. And that reminds more and more this multi-domain concepts and the new warfighting. So it's about the right management of the huge amount of data, and making sure you can collect it, you can process it, you can get the right information at the right time to the right place and make it usable. You can see how much is the time from the sensor to the effector, sensor to shooter time, as we call it sometimes, how much that decreased. And that puts demands on how we configure our forces in the field, how we configure our command control in the field, Also, if you look at the force protection, for example, camouflage, it's not that you camouflage yourself somewhere, you stay there for 2 weeks, and you're okay,
Right.
because the battlefield is full of sensors. So you need to disperse much, you need to be more mobile, more agile. And again, that brings the challenges to command control and communications. You need to basically be able to concentrate the effects without concentrating forces too much. And you can go on and on. So basically there's major lessons like this. Also on the logistics, how do you sustain the forces without having a too heavy logistics tail and being vulnerable on this, which is exactly what we were doing for the last 20 years in out-of-area operations, which was logical because it was different scenario.
Right.
And if you look at the battlefield, as I mentioned, you sometimes, for example, the asymmetry, you have to look also economically. You cannot shoot $1 million rocket
Right.
to shoot down the $20,000 UAV.
Right.
And then you look at what the Ukrainians are doing. For example, the mobile air defense teams. You look at the team. It's a jeep, machine gun. It looks simple. It looks like Second World War. But actually, that's not the trick. The trick is that they know where to wait for the UAV. So there's the technology behind this. Is thousands of sensors. There must be a network. How do you get that information to the right people? So it's about using cloud services. It's about digitalization of the command control. So you can see everything we imagine about the new battlefield with the emerging disruptive technologies. But at the same time, it's a combination with the old stuff because power still matters, artillery matters, and will matter, just like tanks and other things.
Yep. And humans still matter in this equation.
And exactly, and you're right, because it's all about humans.
Yeah, absolutely.
Because you can have whatever weapons, but it's always being served by people.
Right. Right. So interesting. So on final question is, not only are you celebrating an anniversary in NATO membership this year, NATO is celebrating a real mark, 75 years, that we are marking in July here in Washington at the summit. What would you like to see out of the summit this summer?
Well, I would like to see overall, it's not just this summit, will and leadership, because this is what we need actually. We are strong. We are the most successful alliance historically, even though we are relatively new member, but this is the most successful alliance. We are very strong and militarily strongest alliance. We protect about 1 billion people. We have 50% combined of the GDP of the world. We have over 3 million people in arms without the great reserves. And then if you compare it with the Russia threat, for example, but also other threats, I think we have everything we need also to help Ukrainians. We just need a will and leadership. And I would like that from any summit in the future.
Well, I agree. And what a great place to end this discussion. General, thank you so much for joining us today. And thank you for tuning in to CEPA State of the Alliance. Please visit cepa.org and CEPA social media accounts to stay up to date on the latest analysis and events.